Today we'll talk a little about the genetics of Tay-Sachs disease. So you may ask, what is Tay-Sachs disease? It is a rare genetic disease passed from parent to child. The inheritance of Tay-Sachs. Tay-Sachs is a rare inherited neurodegenerative disease. It's also an autosomal recessive disorder and is caused by a gene in an autosome and is only seen in individuals with two copies of the affected allele, which means that the child must inherit two copies of the mutated gene, one from each biological parent, in order to be affected by the disease. There is a 25% chance that the child inherits both copies of the mutated gene and is affected by the disease. Additionally, there is 50% chance their child inherits only one copy of the mutated gene and is a carrier. A carrier is a person that only has one copy of the genetic mutation and they usually don't show any symptoms of the disease. The defective gene in Tay-Sachs is the HEX-A gene. The HEX-A gene gives the body instruction to make part of the beta-hexosimidase A enzyme, which is needed to break down a substance called GM2 ganglioside. When the enzyme is not functional or not made, GM2 ganglioside builds up in the nerve walls of the brain and spinal cord, causing symptoms of the disease. Along with the disease, the affected person can lose certain functions as early as 3 to 6 months of age. This is the most common and severe. Some of the loss of functions can include loss of motor skills, including turning over, crawling, or sitting up, muscle weakness, progressing to paralysis, movement problems, vision loss and blindness, hearing loss and deafness, loss of mental functions, and a lack of responses to surrounding, an increase in startle reflex, and also difficulty swallowing. The less common form is juvenile. The signs and severity of the symptoms vary and begin in childhood. Survival is typically into the teen years, and the loss of functions include behavior problems, a gradual loss of skills and movement control, frequent respiratory infections, slow loss of vision and speech, a decline in mental functions and responsiveness, and they could have seizures. The rare and less severe form is when the affected person is an adult, which starts in late childhood to adulthood. The severity varies greatly, and this form does not always impact life expectancy. Some of the functions, the loss of functions is muscle weakness, loss of coordination, loss of the ability to walk, problems speaking and swallowing, loss of mental function, and psychiatric disorders. What chromosome is the defect found on? It is found on chromosome 15. Chromosome 15 is a focus of increasing interest to both psychiatry and neurology. What mutation occurs in the gene to create the disease? Mutation in both alleles of HEX-A gene on chromosome 15. It is caused by a frameshift mutation on chromosome 15. Mutations in the gene encoding the alpha subunit of beta-hexosimidase a lysosome enzyme composed of alpha and beta polypeptides. What protein is affected? Tay-Sachs disease occurs when the body lacks hexosimidase A, which is a protein that helps break down a group of chemicals found in nerve tissues called gangliosides. Without the protein gangliosides, particularly gangliosides GM2, build up in cells, often nerve cells in the brain. What organelle is affected? Lysosomes, which are organelles that break down large molecules for recycling by the cell. Usually, lysosome digests the unwanted materials from the inside and outside of the cell. It is known to be the stomach of the cell. It fights diseases and reassuring that the cell is healthy. Lysosome interacts with other organelles as it gets the protein created in the rough endoplasmic reticulum from Golgi apparatus and float in the cytoplasm. And who's affected by this in the population? So we have the people in Eastern Europe, the Ashkenazi Jewish descent, French Canadian, and the Louisiana Cajun. And there's also fewer than 500 people in the United States that have Tay-Sachs disease, and 1 in every 27 people carry the Tay-Sachs disease.